I spent one unforgettable night with a man who wasn't mine. At the time, I didn't think much of it. After all, it was just a night like any other. Or so I thought. But the moment the clock struck midnight, everything changed. His touch, his words, they pulled me into something I couldn't control. And when the morning light finally broke through, I realized how far things had gone. How deep I had fallen into a web of lies, of twisted truth and hidden desires. I woke up next to him, his arm draped across me, his warmth still lingering on my skin. He looked so peaceful, so perfect, that I almost forgot who he really was. Almost. The reality came crashing back as soon as I noticed something that didn't belong. A phone left carelessly on the nightstand, its screen glowing in the dim light of the early morning. I picked it up, my heart racing with that familiar sense of curiosity, of caution, of dread. What I saw on that screen, it wasn't just a message. It was a lie, one that shook me to my core. He wasn't the man he pretended to be. In the haze of our lust, I had lost sight of the truth. His carefully crafted stories, his charming smile, they had all been a mask. And when I saw the name on the screen, everything I thought I knew about that night, about him, shattered in an instant. You won't believe the lie he told me, the one he thought he could get away with. And you won't believe the consequences that followed. Because it wasn't just about that one night. No, it was about everything that came after. The slow unraveling of a facade, the dangerous game we both played without even realizing the stakes. This isn't just a story about a one-night stand. It's about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of stepping into a world where nothing is as it seems. But let me take you there. Let me show you how it all began. How one lie led to a path I never thought I'd walk. And when you hear the truth, when you hear what really happened, you'll understand why I'll never look at a man the same way again. Have you ever had one of those nights where everything seems to fall into place? You meet someone, they're charming, the conversation flows, and for a moment, you feel like you found exactly what you've been looking for. It's easy to let your guard down, right? After all, nothing seems off, not at first. You think you know the story, you think you understand the game. But what if the truth is something else entirely? I remember that night as if it were yesterday. The air was thick with anticipation, like the city itself was holding its breath. The moment I saw him, I didn't think twice. His eyes locked onto mine across the room. And for a second, it felt like the world stopped moving. I didn't even need to know his name. He didn't need to tell me. His energy, his presence, it all spoke louder than words ever could. It was effortless. He made it easy to forget everything else. We talked for hours, laughter filling the gaps between moments of silence that somehow didn't feel awkward. And as the night went on, I found myself leaning in, caught up in the magnetic pull of a stranger who felt so familiar. His touch, gentle at first, like a soft invitation, gradually became something more intense, more urgent. And I let it happen because at that moment I thought, why not? This could be the start of something beautiful, something real. But beauty can be deceiving, can't it? Sometimes, the most stunning facades hide the most fragile truths. I remember the moment when we left together. I could feel my heart pounding, not out of fear, but anticipation. The night was still young, and I thought there was no harm in going to his place. What's the worst that could happen? After all, I was in control, right? But deep down, a small voice, one I tried to ignore, whispered something else. Something that felt like caution, something I didn't want to listen to. You ever get that feeling? You know, that small, nagging thought at the back of your mind that tells you to slow down, to stop, to think things through? But you ignore it because the moment is too good, too easy. So you keep moving forward, thinking you'll deal with the consequences later. I didn't think I'd have to face the consequences that night. Not at all. It all seemed so perfect. His place quiet, intimate. The city lights flickered in through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. And as we got closer, as his lips pressed against mine, I let myself believe I was safe. I let myself believe he was exactly who he said he was. But when the first light of dawn crept into the room, I realized how wrong I'd been. Everything was still and silent except for the soft hum of the city outside. And in the dim morning light, that's when I saw it. The phone. His phone, lying carelessly on the nightstand, its screen lighting up with a message that froze me in place. I reached for it, as if I were on autopilot, my fingers trembling. The name on the screen was unfamiliar, but the message, it was the kind of thing you don't just ignore. "You still coming home tonight? I miss you." I stared at those words for what felt like an eternity. My heart started to race, and everything that had felt so easy, so safe, began to unravel. Who was this woman? Why hadn't he mentioned her? Why didn't I notice the signs earlier? I turned to him, my thoughts swirling, but he was still asleep. Peaceful, unaware that the truth was about to come crashing down. But as I sat there, staring at the phone, I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers. But part of me knew it wouldn't change anything. The lies, the mask he wore, they were already in place. And I'd been a fool to believe them. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't a harmless little lie. It was everything I feared, everything I didn't want to see. But I had to face it. I had to look him in the eye and see the man who wasn't mine. The one who had promised me something real, something genuine, only to shatter it all in one careless moment. I knew then that I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't forget the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd made me feel. It wasn't about the night anymore. It was about everything that came after, and the realization that I had been nothing more than another moment for him. A lie that wasn't worth remembering. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering if I confronted him, or if I walked away. But what if I told you that wasn't the end? That the truth didn't come so easily? That even after the lie was exposed, I still found myself tangled in his web, unable to escape the pull of something so tempting, so dangerous? What would you have done? Because it wasn't just a one-night mistake, you see. It was something bigger. And in the end, I realized that I wasn't the only one he was lying to. But let me take you deeper. Let me show you how this story really unfolded, how the man who wasn't mine was never really anyone's to begin with. It all started the night I met him. It wasn't supposed to be anything special, just a random encounter at a bar. I wasn't looking for anything serious, nothing that would change my life. But the moment our eyes met across the room, something about him pulled me in. His gaze was intense, focused, like he was searching for something in me that I couldn't quite understand. And when he walked over, everything else faded away. I could barely hear the noise of the crowd, the clinking of glasses, the laughter in the background. None of that mattered. All I could hear was his voice, deep, smooth, a voice that made my skin tingle. He wasn't like anyone I had ever met. Tall, dark, with a smile that promised danger. It was like he knew exactly what I needed to hear, what I wanted to feel. We exchanged a few words, meaningless small talk at first, but the way he looked at me made me feel like I was the only person in the room. And that's the thing about people like him. They know how to make you believe you're special, even if you're nothing more than an object of desire. He didn't rush, didn't try to charm me with empty flattery. He simply spoke to me like I was the only one who mattered. I shouldn't have let my guard down. But in that moment, with the lights dimmed and the world outside seeming so far away, I did. I followed him out of the bar without a second thought, as if I was walking into something I should have known better than to trust. His apartment was the kind that spoke of wealth, sophistication, impressive but cold. The silence in the space felt almost oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. As I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. He had that effect on me, always just a little too close, always a little too convincing. We talked for a while, or rather he did. His words flowed easily, but I was barely listening. The way he moved, the way his body shifted when he spoke, I was mesmerized. It was almost as if I couldn't look away. And then just like that, it wasn't words anymore. It was his touch. His lips were on my neck before I could even think. One moment, we were speaking, and the next, everything was blurring into one. I didn't expect it, but I couldn't stop myself. He kissed me like a man who knew exactly what he wanted. And I couldn't find it in myself to say no. Every kiss, every move, felt like it was drawing me deeper into something I couldn't escape. But it wasn't until later, when the haze of lust began to lift, that the truth became clear. The truth I'd ignored. The lie. As I lay there in the aftermath, in the stillness of the early morning, I noticed something I shouldn't have. A phone placed carelessly on the nightstand, its screen glowing in the low light. My eyes fell to it, drawn like a magnet, and there it was. A message. A name I didn't recognize. One that wasn't his. A woman's name. And not just any woman's name, his girlfriend's. A wave of panic rose in me. A knot formed in my stomach, tightening with every second I stared at the screen. This was no casual night. I wasn't just some random woman to him. I was just part of the game. My mind raced as I struggled to process what was happening. I felt my pulse quicken, the walls closing in, the weight of the lie pressing on me like a vice. I wanted to confront him, to throw his lies back in his face, but a part of me was still caught up in what had just happened. The sex, the passion, it felt real, even though I now knew it couldn't have been. Was I just another conquest to him? Another notch on his belt? Or was this something he had done before? Something he was used to? That easy charm of his weaving its way into the lives of people like me? I got up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I should have left, walked out right then and there. But I couldn't. I needed answers, needed to know how deep the lie went, how far this man was willing to go to keep up the facade. And so I waited. He woke up slowly, stretching like nothing had happened, like nothing had changed. His smile, that damn smile, returned, but there was something behind it now, something I could no longer ignore. The mask was slipping, and yet, he still didn't seem to see me, see the look in my eyes that screamed I know. He didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't care. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and smooth, like the night had been nothing but a pleasant memory. He reached out to pull me close, but I froze. Every instinct told me to run, to get out. But my body remained still, almost numb to the situation. How could I stay in the same place as the man who had lied to me, who had led me into his web? The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until finally, I found my voice. "I saw your phone," I said, my voice trembling, but I couldn't let him see my fear. Not yet. For a moment he didn't answer. Then, the smile faltered just a fraction, and it was all I needed to see. The truth was there, hidden behind the calm, collected exterior. And just like that, everything shattered. The man I thought I knew, the one I had let into my life for a night of passion, was nothing but a stranger with 1,000 lies. And I was nothing but another chapter in his game. I swear, I almost convinced myself that the night wasn't that bad. You know, the whole just another wild night routine. I mean, I had a glass of wine, a little flirtation, and boom! A night I'd never forget. That's the thing, isn't it? You never expect it to be the one time you let your guard down. But hey, who doesn't enjoy a little drama now and then, right? It's funny. There's something about a guy with that dangerous charm. You know the type. Smooth talker, looking at you like he's about to steal your breath away. And it works. Like, how does it work? One second, he's leaning in, whispering sweet things like a bad romance novel. And the next, he's got me wrapped up in his arms. But here's the thing. It wasn't all bad. At least not in the beginning. I mean, yeah, I could have made better choices that night. Who hasn't been there? Out at a bar, a little tipsy, eyes lock across the room, and you're like, okay, I'm down for this. But trust me, it was way too smooth. Smooth like, well, a little too smooth. If I'm being honest, I should have known better. But there I was not thinking. Just caught up in the moment, in the heat of it all. It wasn't until later that I realized what I'd actually gotten myself into. So I'm all caught up in this guy thinking, hey, this could be a fun no strings attached thing. No harm, right? You know, the whole just for fun thing. You know what they say, don't go home with someone on the first date. Yeah, well, sometimes you just get a little reckless. Sometimes you just don't care. The night went on like that, a blur of passion and half-baked decisions. But I woke up the next morning and the reality of it all hit me. He was still asleep beside me, his arm across me like a weight I didn't want. And then it happened, the phone. I spotted it glowing on the nightstand. It wasn't the soft light of some romantic message. No, it was different. I felt that knot in my stomach when I realized I'd been ignoring the warning signs. The phone was right there, and there I was, the temptation pulling me in. Now let me tell you, this is where it gets funny. I'm sitting there, staring at the phone, wondering whether I should just walk away or peek at what was inside. I mean, I didn't want to be that person, but come on. Would you resist the temptation if you were in my shoes? Of course not. So I pick it up, and let me tell you, that screen? It's glowing with a text notification. And I'm like, oh great, here we go. So of course I open it. Don't judge me. We all do it. What I saw was not what I expected. I thought I'd find something normal, maybe a cute text, or even a hey babe. But no, what do I get? A name. Not his name, of course. That would have been too easy. No, this was someone else's name. And not just anyone, a woman. A woman he had been texting all night. All night. In fact, they had been exchanging texts while I was right there in his bed. That right there, that's when the reality hit like a freight train. At that moment, I couldn't help but chuckle. I was in shock, yes, but also laughing at myself. How did I get here? I kept asking myself. It was like a bad sitcom, and I was the punchline. And let me tell you, the twist wasn't over yet. Oh no, it gets better, because the texts weren't just casual. They were intimate. And by intimate, I mean texting things that should never be sent while you're sharing a bed with someone else. I mean, come on, how dare he? But here's the best part. I had been there in his arms completely unaware. All the while, I thought I was the only one. He had played me, just like a good player does. And you know what? I'll give him credit where it's due. He did it so smoothly that I didn't even see it coming. But here's the kicker. The one thing he didn't realize. I wasn't the fool he thought I was. No, this wasn't just some naive girl who'd fall for whatever charm he dished out. And that's when I decided to have a little fun of my own. The game had just begun. I thought the night was over. The haze of passion had lifted, leaving nothing but the soft glow of the morning sun spilling through the curtains. We had talked, laughed, even shared things I didn't expect to. For a moment, everything felt real. But in the quiet stillness of the room, something tugged at me. A feeling, a whisper, barely perceptible yet undeniable. It was the phone. That damn phone. Sitting there innocently on the nightstand like it had no clue what it was about to unleash. It wasn't the first time I glanced at it, but this time, something in the back of my mind screamed at me to look closer. And so I did. The name on the screen wasn't a name I recognized, but it should have been. It was his girlfriend's name. And yet, I had seen the same name earlier that night. The same name he had introduced me to with a casual laugh. My best friend, he had said. We go way back. That's when it hit me. That was the lie. That's when the truth started to crack. I thought I was just one of many, but this wasn't just about a lie. This was something much bigger. And just when I thought I had it figured out, just when I thought I could confront him, the real shocker came. I didn't expect it. I didn't even have time to process it before the door opened. I froze. Standing there, in the doorway was her. His girlfriend. The one he had claimed was just a friend. The one he had pretended didn't matter. The one he had told me was nothing, but a part of his past. There she was, standing in front of me, with a look that could freeze fire, her eyes wide with disbelief and rage. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It didn't make sense. How could he have been so bold, so reckless, to bring us both into the same room, unaware of the other? And how could she, knowing the truth, have walked in with such calm composure? The silence stretched between us. And then she spoke. "You didn't think he'd lie to you, did you?" she said, her voice cold, cutting through the tension like a knife. I couldn't even respond. My mouth went dry. This wasn't the twist I had expected. The lies, the deceit, it all came pouring out. She wasn't just his girlfriend. No, she was his fiancée. They were planning a life together, a future, while I was just a fleeting moment, a temporary escape. But the worst part, the part that I still can't forget, she wasn't angry. Not really. No, she wasn't upset at him at all. She was upset with me, the one who had fallen for his charm, who had been played like the fool in their twisted little game. The entire time, she had been watching, waiting, knowing exactly what he was doing. And now, she had come to collect. She wasn't there for a confrontation. She was there to claim her territory. I couldn't move. My body went numb as she walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, as if to punctuate every step she took. I wanted to say something, anything to defend myself. But the truth was, I had been just as much of a fool as he had made me feel. I had let myself fall for the illusion, the seduction, the lie. And just when I thought the worst was over, she turned to him. And what she said next changed everything. "He's mine," she said, her voice dripping with possession. "You can have the scraps." There it was. The truth. She wasn't just his partner. She was his everything. And I was just the distraction. But that wasn't the real shocker. No, the real shock came when she reached into her purse, pulled out a small, innocuous piece of paper, and handed it to me. It was a receipt from earlier that night. A receipt fro.
"He lied to you, sweetheart," she said, her eyes darkening with a mix of satisfaction and something else, something dangerous. "He didn't just bring you into this world. He promised me the same thing, over and over." I looked at the receipt, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I knew. The story wasn't just about one lie. It was about the lies that had been passed between us both, carefully constructed to keep us in the dark. And what happened that night wasn't the end. No, it was only the beginning of a truth that I would never have imagined. Because the man I thought I knew, the man I had let into my life, had been playing us both from the start.
And that's when I realized it. The lies were never just about the night. They weren't just about the intoxicating chemistry, or the way his touch made me forget the world around me. They were about something much deeper, something I wasn't ready to face. The red flags had always been there, fluttering in the background, but I was too blinded by desire, too lost in the moment to see them. You see, the truth doesn't always reveal itself when you want it to. Sometimes it hides deep inside the corners of your mind, lurking beneath the surface of everything you feel. I thought I had control. I thought I knew what I was doing, that I could walk away when it was time. But sometimes the heart takes over, and logic is nowhere to be found. When I finally saw that phone screen, when I read those words that shattered everything, it wasn't just the betrayal that hit me. It was the realization that I had let myself fall for the illusion. The man I thought I knew, the man who had seduced me with his charm and promises, was never mine to begin with. He was someone else's. His words, his affection, all of it was built on a lie. In that moment, I understood something I had never truly seen before. The power of deceit isn't in how convincingly it's told, but in how desperate we are to believe it. We tell ourselves stories, we weave fantasies, because they feel good, because they fill the empty spaces inside us. But those lies, they never last. They crack under the pressure of truth, and when they do, they take everything with them. And here's the lesson I learned, the one I carry with me every day now. You can't trust someone who's too good at pretending. A man who isn't honest with himself will never be honest with you. The ones who put on the perfect show, who seem to have everything together, are often the ones with the most to hide. And I should have known better than to trust him when there were so many signs. when my instincts screamed at me to walk away before it was too late. If only I had known. If only I had listened to those quiet warnings. Those moments where things didn't quite add up. If I had trusted my own judgment, I might have walked away before the lie became something I couldn't escape. But I didn't. And now I've learned that love and trust aren't earned by words alone, no matter how sweet or seductive they sound. They're earned through actions, through honesty, and through the kind of transparency that leaves no room for doubt. So, if you take anything from this, let it be this: trust yourself first. When you feel something isn't right, don't dismiss it. Pay attention to the things that don't add up, the words that don't match the actions. Don't let yourself be fooled by a pretty face and empty promises. Because when the truth finally comes to light, it may just cost you more than you're willing to give. By the time I thought I had seen it all, the truth was just beginning to unfold. You see, after that night, after I confronted him about the lie, everything seemed like it should have been over. But life has a way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect them. I thought it was just a mistake, a one-off incident, something I could laugh off with my friends. But then came the second lie, and then the third. Each time, I found myself wrapped deeper in a story that wasn't mine to tell. But still I couldn't let go. The man who wasn't mine. I kept thinking about him, about how everything had felt so real, even though nothing about him was true. I'll be honest with you, after that night, it didn't end there. There was something else, something I didn't anticipate, something that followed me in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. He had a way of getting under my skin, making me believe in his lies, in his empty promises. And trust me, when I say this, it wasn't just about the secrets he kept. It was about how they started to creep into my life, piece by piece, until everything I knew felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I tried to walk away. Really, I did. But like a moth to a flame, I kept coming back to the one person I knew I shouldn't. And the worst part, I still wasn't seeing the full picture. The whole story was a jigsaw puzzle, and I was missing some key pieces. You see, in the end, the lies he told me weren't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing that maybe I had been lying to myself the whole time. So I kept asking myself, what happens when the man you thought was a stranger turns out to be someone you can't walk away from? And why, even after all the pain, does it feel like I can't stop chasing him? But this isn't even the craziest story I have. No, not by a long shot. You wouldn't believe what happened next. Wait until I tell you about the time I went to that party, the one where things got so out of hand. I found myself face to face with the very person I never thought I'd see again. The one person who turned my world upside down. If you thought tonight's story was wild, just wait. You won't believe where the next chapter takes me. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. I'm just getting started.